Good evening. This is the first time since taking the oath of office that I felt an issue was so important, so threatening, that it warranted talking directly with you, the American people. All of us agree that the gravest domestic threat facing our nation today is drugs. Drugs have strained our faith in our system of justice. Our courts, our prisons, our legal system are stretched to the breaking point. The social costs of drugs are mounting. In short, drugs are sapping our strength as a nation. Turn on the evening news or pick up the morning paper, and you'll see what some Americans know just by stepping out their front door. Our most serious problem today is cocaine, and in particular, crack. Who's responsible? Let me tell you straight out. Everyone who uses drugs, everyone who sells drugs, and everyone who looks the other way. Tonight I'll tell you how many Americans are using illegal drugs. I will present to you our national strategy to deal with every aspect of this threat, and I will ask you to get involved in what promises to be a very difficult fight. This is crack cocaine, seized a few days ago by drug enforcement agents in a park just across the street from the White House. It could easily have been heroin or PCP. It's as innocent looking as candy, but it's turning our cities into battle zones, and it's murdering our children. Let there be no mistake. This stuff is poison. Some used to call drugs harmless recreation. They're not. Drugs are a real and terribly dangerous threat to our neighborhoods, our friends, and our families. No one among us is out of harm's way. When 4-year-olds play in playgrounds strewn with discarded hypodermic needles and crack vials, it breaks my heart. When cocaine, one of the most deadly and addictive illegal drugs, is available to school kids, it's an outrage. And when hundreds of thousands of babies are born each year to mothers who use drugs, premature babies, born desperately sick, and even the most defenseless among us are at risk. These are the tragedies behind the statistics, but the numbers also have quite a story to tell. Let me share with you the results of the recently completed household survey of the National Institute on Drug Abuse. It compares recent drug use to 3 years ago. It tells us some good news and some very bad news. First, the good. As you can see in the chart, in 1985, the government estimated that 23 million Americans were using drugs on a current basis. That is, at least once in the preceding month. Last year, that number fell by more than a third. That means almost 9 million fewer Americans are casual drug users. Good news. Because we changed our national attitude toward drugs, casual drug use has declined. We have many to thank: our brave law enforcement officers, religious leaders, teachers, community activists, and leaders of business and labor. We should also thank the media for their exhaustive news and editorial coverage, and for their airtime and space for anti-drug messages. And finally, I want to thank President and Mrs. Reagan for their leadership. All of these good people told the truth, that drug use is wrong and dangerous. But as much comfort as we can draw from these dramatic reductions, there is also bad news, very bad news. Roughly 8 million people have used cocaine in the past year. Almost 1 million of them used it frequently, once a week or more. What this means is that in spite of the fact that overall cocaine use is down, frequent use has almost doubled in the last few years. And that's why habitual cocaine users, especially crack users, are the most pressing immediate drug problem. What then is our plan? To begin with, I trust the lesson of experience. No single policy will cut it, no matter how glamorous or magical it may sound. To win the war against addictive drugs like crack will take more than just a federal strategy. It will take a national strategy, one that reaches into every school, every workplace, involving every family. Earlier today, I sent this document, our first such national strategy, to the Congress. It was developed with the hard work of our nation's first drug policy director, Bill Bennett. In preparing this plan, we talked with state, local and community leaders, law enforcement officials, and experts in education, drug prevention, and rehabilitation. We talked with parents and kids. We took a long, hard look at all that the federal government has done about drugs in the past, what's worked, and let's be honest, what hasn't. Too often, people in government acted as if they're part of the problem, whether fighting drug production or drug smuggling or drug demand was the only problem. But turf battles won't win this war. Teamwork will. Tonight, I'm announcing a strategy that reflects the coordinated, cooperative commitment of all our federal agencies. In short, this plan is as comprehensive as the problem. With this strategy, we now finally have a plan that coordinates our resources, our programs, and the people who run them. Our weapons in this strategy are the law and criminal justice system, our foreign policy, our treatment systems in our schools and drug prevention programs. So the basic weapons we need are the ones we already have. What's been lacking is a strategy to effectively use them. Let me address 4 of the major elements of our strategy. First, we are determined to enforce the law, to make our streets and neighborhoods safe. So to start, I'm proposing that we more than double federal assistance to state and local law enforcement. Americans have a right to safety in and around their homes, and we won't have safe neighborhoods unless we're tough on drug criminals, much tougher than we are now. Sometimes that means tougher penalties, but more often it just means punishment that is swift and certain. We've all heard stories about drug dealers who are caught and arrested again and again, but never punished. Well, here the rules have changed. If you sell drugs, you will be caught, and when you're caught, you will be prosecuted, and once you're convicted, you will do time. Caught, prosecuted, punished. I'm also proposing that we enlarge our criminal justice system across the board, at the local, state, and federal levels alike. We need more prisons, more jails, more courts, more prosecutors. So tonight I'm requesting altogether an almost $1.5 billion increase in drug-related federal spending on law enforcement. And while illegal drug use is found in every community, nowhere is it worse than our public housing projects. You know, the poor have never had it easy in this world. But in the past, they weren't mugged on the way home from work by crack gangs, and their children didn't have to dodge bullets on the way to school. And that's why I'm targeting $50 million to fight crime in public housing projects, to help restore order and to kick out the dealers for good. The second element of our strategy looks beyond our borders, where the cocaine and crack bought on America's streets is grown and processed. In Colombia alone, cocaine killers have gunned down a leading statesman, murdered almost 200 judges and 7 members of their Supreme Court. The besieged governments of the drug-producing countries are fighting back, fighting to break the international drug rings. But you and I agree with the courageous president of Colombia, Virgilio Barco, who said that if Americans use cocaine, then Americans are paying for murder. American cocaine users need to understand that our nation has zero tolerance for casual drug use. We have a responsibility not to leave our brave friends in Colombia to fight alone. The $65 million emergency assistance announced 2 weeks ago was just our first step in assisting the Andean nations in their fight against the cocaine cartels. Colombia has already arrested suppliers, seized tons of cocaine, and confiscated palatial homes of drug lords. But Colombia faces a long uphill battle, so we must be ready to do more. Our strategy allocates more than $250 million for next year in military and law enforcement assistance for the 3 Andean nations of Colombia, Bolivia, and Peru. This will be the first part of a 5-year, $2 billion program to counter the producers, the traffickers, and the smugglers. I spoke with President Barco just last week, and we hope to meet with the leaders of affected countries in an unprecedented drug summit, all to coordinate an inter-American strategy against the cartels. We will work with our allies and friends, especially our economic summit partners, to do more in the fight against drugs. I'm also asking the Senate to ratify the United Nations Anti-Drug Convention concluded last December. To stop those drugs on the way to America, I propose that we spend more than $1.5 billion on interdiction. Greater interagency cooperation, combined with sophisticated intelligence gathering and Defense Department technology, can help stop drugs at our borders. And our message to the drug cartels is this: the rules have changed. We will help any government that wants our help. When requested, we will, for the first time, make available the appropriate resources of America's armed forces. We will intensify our efforts against drug smugglers on the high seas, in international airspace, and at our borders. We will stop the flow of chemicals from the United States used to process drugs. We will pursue and enforce international agreements to track drug money to the front men and financiers. And then we will handcuff these money launderers and jail them, just like any street dealer. And for the drug kingpins, the death penalty. The third part of our strategy concerns drug treatment. Experts believe that there are 2 million American drug users who may be able to get off drugs with proper treatment. But right now, only 40% of them are actually getting help. This is simply not good enough. Many people who need treatment won't seek it on their own, and some who do seek it are put on a waiting list. Most programs were set up to deal with heroin addicts, but today the major problem is cocaine users. It's time we expand our treatment systems and do a better job of providing services to those who need them. And so tonight, I'm proposing an increase of $321 million in federal spending on drug treatment. With this strategy, we will do more. We will work with the states. We will encourage employers to establish employee assistance programs to cope with drug use. And because addiction is such a cruel inheritance, we will intensify our search for ways to help expectant mothers who use drugs. Fourth, we must stop illegal drug use before it starts. Unfortunately, it begins early, for many kids before they're teens. But it doesn't start the way you might think, from a dealer or an addict hanging around a school playground. More often, our kids first get their drugs free from friends or even from older brothers or sisters. Peer pressure spreads drug use. Peer pressure can help stop it. I'm proposing a $250 million increase in federal funds for school and community prevention programs that help young people and adults reject enticements to try drugs. And I'm proposing something else. Every school, college, and university, and every workplace must adopt tough, but fair policies about drug use by students and employees. And those that will not adopt such policies will not get federal funds, period. The private sector also has an important role to play. I spoke with a businessman named Jim Burke, who said he was haunted by the thought, a nightmare really, that somewhere in America, at any given moment, there is a teenage girl who should be in school instead of giving birth to a child addicted to cocaine. So Jim did something. He led an anti-drug partnership financed by private funds to work with advertisers and media firms. Their partnership is now determined to work with our strategy by generating educational messages worth $1 million a day, every day for the next 3 years. $1 billion worth of advertising, all to promote the anti-drug message. As president, one of my first missions is to keep the national focus on our offensive against drugs. And so next week I will take the anti-drug message to the classrooms of America in a special television address, one that I hope will reach every school, every young American. But drug education doesn't begin in class or in TV. It must begin at home and in the neighborhood. Parents and families must set the first example of a drug-free life. And when families are broken, caring friends and neighbors must step in. These are the most important elements in our strategy to fight drugs. They are all designed to reinforce one another, to mesh into a powerful whole, to mount an aggressive attack on the problem from every angle. This is the first time in the history of our country that we truly have a comprehensive strategy. As you can tell, such an approach will not come cheaply. Last February, I asked for a $700 million increase in the drug budget for the coming year. And now, over the past 6 months of careful study, we have found an immediate need for another $1.5 billion. With this added $2.2 billion, our 1990 drug budget totals almost $8 billion, the largest increase in history. We need this program fully implemented right away. The next fiscal year begins just 26 days from now. So tonight I'm asking the Congress, which has helped us formulate this strategy, to help us move it forward immediately. We can pay for this fight against drugs without raising taxes or adding to the budget deficit. We have submitted our plan to Congress that shows just how to fund it within the limits of our bipartisan budget agreement. Now, I know some will still say that we're not spending enough money, but those who judge our strategy only by its price tag simply don't understand the problem. Let's face it, we've all seen in the past that money alone won't solve our toughest problems. To be strong and efficient, our strategy needs these funds, but there is no match for a united America, a determined America, an angry America. Our outrage against drugs unites us, brings us together behind this one plan of action, an assault on every front. This is the toughest domestic challenge we've faced in decades, and it's a challenge we must face, not as Democrats or Republicans, liberals or conservative, but as Americans. The key is a coordinated, united effort. We've responded faithfully to the request of the Congress to produce our nation's first national drug strategy. I'll be looking to the Democratic majority and our Republicans in Congress for leadership and bipartisan support. And our citizens deserve cooperation, not competition, a national effort, not a partisan bidding war. To start, Congress needs not only to act on this national drug strategy, but also to act on our crime package announced last May, a package to toughen sentences, beef up law enforcement, and build new prison space for 24,000 inmates. You and I both know the federal government can't do it alone. The states need to match tougher federal laws with tougher laws of their own, stiffer bail, probation, parole, and sentencing. And we need your help. If people you know are users, help them get off drugs. If you're a parent, talk to your kids about drugs tonight. Call your local drug prevention program. Be a big brother or sister to a child in need. Pitch in with your local neighborhood watch program. Whether you give your time or talent, everyone counts. Every employer who bans drugs from the workplace, every school that's tough on drug use, every neighborhood in which drugs are not welcome, and most important, every one of you who refuses to look the other way. Every one of you counts. Of course, victory will take hard work and time, but together we will win. Too many young lives are at stake. Not long ago, I read a newspaper story about a little boy named Dooney, who until recently lived in a crack house in a suburb of Washington, D.C. In Dooney's neighborhood, children don't flinch at the sound of gunfire, and when they play, they pretend to sell to each other small white rocks that they call crack. Life at home was so cruel that Dooney begged his teachers to let him sleep on the floor at school. And when asked about his future, 6-year-old Dooney answers, "I don't want to sell drugs, but I'll probably have to." Well, Dooney does not have to sell drugs. No child in America should have to live like this. Together, as a people, we can save these kids. We've already transformed a national attitude of tolerance into one of condemnation. But the war on drugs will be hard won, neighborhood by neighborhood, block by block, child by child. If we fight this war as a divided nation, then the war is lost. But if we face this evil as a nation united, this will be nothing but a handful of useless chemicals. Victory. Victory over drugs is our cause, a just cause. And with your help, we are going to win. Thank you, God bless you, and good night.
United States Senator Joseph Biden from Delaware presents the Democratic Party's response to the President's speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a job to do. We all have a job to do. We speak with great concern about the drug problem in America today, but we fail to appreciate or address it for what it really is, the number one threat to our national security. It affects the readiness of our Army, the productivity of our workers, and the achievement of our students, and the very health and safety of our families. America is under attack, literally, under attack by an enemy who is well-financed, well-supplied, and well-armed, and fully capable of declaring total war against the nation and its people, as we've seen in Colombia. Here in America, the enemy is already ashore, and for the first time, we are fighting and losing a war on our own soil. Every president for the past 2 decades, Democrat and Republican alike, has declared war on drugs. And each of them has lost that war and lost it miserably. They lost because they attempted to deal with only part of the drug problem. They lost because their initiatives were pulled apart by bureaucratic squabbling among their advisors. They lost because they always did too little and they did it too late. That's why the Democrats and Republicans in the Congress got together last year to write the law that required the President to give us a national drug strategy. The one you heard tonight. You heard him deliver it. We don't oppose the President's plan. All we want to do is strengthen it. We don't doubt his resolve. All we want to do is stiffen it. The trouble is that the President's proposals are not big enough to deal with the problem. His rhetoric isn't matched by the resources we need to get the job done. Quite frankly, the President's plan's not tough enough, bold enough, or imaginative enough to meet the crisis at hand. If you had a child in your family that was seriously ill, I doubt whether you'd call a family meeting to discuss what percentage of the family budget you were willing to spend to make him well. You wouldn't say that we can't afford to spend more than a penny out of every dollar the family has to cure the child. But that's exactly what the President would have us do. Spend one penny out of every tax dollar to fight drugs. The Defense Department spends $300 billion a year to prepare for a war we hope we'll never have to fight. But the President says he wants to spend only $8 billion next year on a war we're already fighting and we're losing. The President says he wants to wage a war on drugs, but if that's true, what we need is another D-Day, not another Vietnam, not another limited war fought on the cheap and destined for stalemate and human tragedy. Now I'm going to point out some specific things, 6 of them, that we find inadequate about the President's plan. I think the President has to join us in making a significantly greater commitment to these 6 areas to stem the rising tide of violence in America, and that's what it is, violence. First, we have to join together to ensure that drug dealers are punished swiftly, surely, and severely. And in line with what the President is calling for, we have to hold every drug user accountable. Because if there were no drug users, there would be no appetite for drugs and there'd be no market for them. Let's take a look at what the real problem is. It's not just how many people are using drugs. As the President said, the number of people using drugs, cocaine in particular, is down in our country. That's true. But the violence associated with drugs is spewing out all over America, and that's terrible. I know it's hard to believe, but this very day, violent drug offenders will commit more than 100,000 crimes on this day alone. And the sad part is that we have no more police in the streets of our major cities than we had 10 years ago. And what the President proposes won't help much. What he proposes is no increase over what the Congress has already approved last year. In a nutshell, the President's plan doesn't include enough police officers to catch the violent thugs, not enough prosecutors to convict them, not enough judges to sentence them, and not enough prison cells to put them away for a long time. That's why right now, 6 out of every 10 criminals who are arrested on drug charges have their cases dropped. That's why we think the President should triple the commitment that he's made tonight for police, prosecutors, and judges for our cities and our states. Second, education. The President says he's increasing money for drug education because he knows what we know. It works. We found out that when students understand how harmful cocaine is, they're 5 times less likely to even try the drug. And right now, the drug education message is reaching only 50% of the children in this country. And the President's plan, for all the talk, will only increase our efforts by 5%. You know, drug education is the only vaccine we have against drug abuse among our young. And can you imagine me sitting before you and saying, we're only going to vaccinate 50% of the children against polio or smallpox? We have to do more. We have to educate our children about the dangers of drugs. We have to start in kindergarten, because we know that last year, 1 out of every 4 high school students in America tried drugs, and that the other 3 were prime targets of drug pushers. We can't afford to lose a generation while we're sorting out the budgetary priorities of this nation. We must do more, and now. Third, we disagree with the President's decision to cut back on our previous commitment to protect against drugs coming across the border, to cut the Customs Service, the Coast Guard, and the Border Patrol. We think we should do more to stem the flow of drugs across our borders, and we think we should go one step further. Let's go after the drug lords where they live, with an international strike force. There must be no safe haven for these narco-terrorists, and they must know it. Fourth, the experts tell us there are 6.5 million addicts, addicted drug addicts out there, and that they're committing thousands upon thousands of crimes. And under the President's plan, we'll treat only 19 out of 100 addicts. He talked about pregnant women. Well, his proposal would help only 1/4 of the children under the age of 16 who are addicted, and 1/4 of the women who are pregnant and addicted. We can do better than that to prevent the next generation from becoming a generation of violence. Fifth, the President has to take charge and end the bureaucratic infighting that plagues the anti-drug efforts now. Last year, for example, and listen to this, last year the Congress approved $5 million to protect Colombian judges, providing the kind of support that the Colombian Justice Minister, Mrs. DeGrief, recently asked for in Washington. Yet not a single penny of that $5 million arrived in Bogota, Colombia, before the Justice Minister arrived in the United States a couple weeks ago. And the President's plan does nothing to prevent such fiascos from happening in the future. He must eliminate the duplication among drug-fighting agencies and end the waste. That's one of the main reasons why we created the drug czar in the first place. The last thing I'd like to say about the strategy the President proposes is that we have to make a greater investment in the scientific community. The scientific community that's pursuing innovative approaches for fighting the drug crisis, just as we do for cancer and for AIDS and for Alzheimer's. They're already at work. In a lab in Delaware, scientists are working on new medicines that may block an addict's craving for drugs. And across the country in Los Alamos weapons laboratories, other scientists are exploring new state-of-the-art techniques to battle the narco-terrorist. We need more of that kind of scientific enterprise. We need to enlist America's scientific muscle in turning back the drug traffickers. You know, listening to both of us, this may seem all complicated, very complicated, but it isn't. We know what has to be done. We have to educate our children not to take drugs. Reach our children who are on drugs and get them off. We have to lock up the dealers for a long, long time, and we have to attack the source from which the drugs come. And we have to do that not a piece at a time, but all at once. And we have to do it now. And there's not any reason why we can't do that. We have the power, we have the money, and we have the knowledge. And we don't have to promise a world without worry or fear. We're not asking for that much. All we have to do together is to keep our promises and stay together. To put it in very personal terms for a moment, Joe Biden, me, I would settle for a world in which I could worry about the same kinds of things that my parents worried about, in which I only had to worry about the grades my children got in school rather than the drugs they're being exposed to, in which I only had to worry about the prices my wife had to pay at the supermarket instead of fearing that she might get mugged by a junkie in the parking lot as she loads her groceries into the car, in which tonight I could call my mom just to wish her pleasant dreams, not for the purpose of making sure she's safe in her own home. That's the kind of world I want. That's the kind of world you deserve. And there's no reason we can't have it. Thank you.